Imagine you got hired as a cybersecurity specialist at an organization, and one of your first tasks is reviewing file permissions on a company's internal web servers. You go ahead, you open a shared folder, and you notice something very strange. Everyone, from internees to external contractors, everyone has read and write access to the payroll and customer data files. Now, as a good cybersecurity specialist, you obviously think this is bad. But what should be the right permissions? What should the right permissions look like? Who should be allowed to do what? And this is exactly where access control models come in. And this decision is based on organizational policies, and sometimes it's not very straightforward. But I can assure you that in your career as a cybersecurity specialist, you will definitely have to deal with access control models. Now, what are access control models? So formally, access control models are frameworks that specify how subjects, and what are subjects? Users or systems. So subjects are people or systems that are performing some action. They want to do something, okay? So access control models are frameworks that specify how subjects can access objects. And what are objects? Files or resources. So basically, we're talking about subjects wanting to access or do something to objects. And these frameworks govern or specify which subjects can access which objects or perform which actions. Now, access control models are critical for managing user permissions and enforcing access policies in an organization. I know it's not the most exciting part of cybersecurity, but this is one area that organizations care a lot for in order to protect their intellectual property, business secrets, and all sorts of sensitive information. And therefore, it is essential to be well versed with these. Now, before we go ahead, let's have a high-level overview of what are the different types of access control models. You can think of these as different strategies on how you can control access to different resources. Okay, so there are basically 4 different types of access control models. The first one is called DAC or discretionary access control. The second one is called MAC or mandatory access control. The third one is role-based access control, and the last one is attribute-based access control. Now, in this lecture, I'm going to give a high-level overview for each of these 4 different types of access control models, and then we're going to take a deeper dive into each. And we're also going to discuss real-world applications and real-world scenarios where each model would fit. Now, let's start with discretionary access control. Now, this one is really simple. This basically means that the person who owns the file or the resource gets to decide who else can access it. So for example, let's say you have the key to your room or apartment. So if you feel like it, you can give the key to anyone, and then that person will be able to access your apartment or your room. So it's a very simple and flexible solution, but it's also a problem. Now, these type of access controls like discretionary access control work well if you're talking about personal computers or your personal stuff. But in big organizations, this can become really messy. The second type of access control is mandatory access control. Now, where the discretionary access control was very loose and very flexible, the mandatory access control is very strict. Everything is classified. It's like the military. And if your clearance level doesn't match the file's classification, so imagine you have different types of files in different classifications. For example, some is top secret, then you have secret, then you have maybe classified. If your security level doesn't match the security level required to access a certain file, then you won't be able to access it. Even if the owner of that file wants you to have that access, it still wouldn't work. So it is very strict and it's not flexible at all. In a way, you can think of these as completely opposite to each other. DAC is very flexible, MAC is super strict. But apart from these, one of the most common type of access control used is role-based access control. And this is what most companies use today. Now, instead of assigning permissions directly to people, imagine you have 1,000 people working in an organization at different roles. Okay, you have internees, you have external contractors, you have managers, you have engineers, you have senior engineers, C-level executives, and all those kind of people. Okay. Now imagine you want to restrict access to a certain file, for example. Now just think about how complicated it would be if you have to specify. Like for example, John is allowed Paul is not allowed, Emily is allowed, Anne is not allowed. Just think of it how impractical it would be. So to solve that problem, we have role-based access control. In this one, we define roles and then we assign people to those roles. So for example, you can have, for example, HR managers, you can have managers, C-level executives, just big roles, and then you assign permissions to those roles. And people are assigned to different roles. Think of it like basically creating groups and then assigning permissions to groups. The last one is attribute based. This is a very smart and flexible access control model. It uses if conditions. So for example, you can say that if the user is in the finance department and if it is a weekday and they are on a company laptop, grant access to this file. Okay, so attribute based access control uses attributes. This could be time of the day, the location of the user. For example, if the same user has all these conditions, another condition could be they should be within, for example, that city. The geographic location should be within that city. Those kind of restrictions, okay? So overall, access control models are fundamental to cybersecurity. And if you think about it, they are basically protecting the CIA triad, which we studied before. Access control models are essential for maintaining confidentiality, integrity, and availability. In the next lecture, we're going to discuss all of these models in much more detail.